The Legislature Today show is brought to you by the North Dakota Association of Oil and Gas Producing Counties. Online at ndenergy.org. The Credit Union Association of the Dakotas, creating awareness about the benefits of credit unions. The University of Mary, America's leadership university. And the North Dakota Corn, Soybean, and Grain Growers Association, as well as the North Dakota Ethanol Council. And now back to the Legislature Today with your host, Dale Wetzel.
This is Dale Wetzel. This is the Legislature Today radio program. We're coming to you from the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. In our second half hour of the first hour of the Legislature Today, we're going to be speaking about an education finance bill that the North Dakota House passed by a whopping 2 votes just less than 2 hours ago. We have with us Representative Mike Nathey. He's a Republican from Bismarck and the chairman of the House Finance and Taxation Committee. And we also have Representative Mark Sanford. He's a Republican from Grand Forks who is a former school superintendent in Grand Forks, a retired superintendent, and these two gentlemen are intimately familiar with the bill, and we're going to speak to them about that. First of all, we might mention, and we'll ask these two gentlemen to elaborate on it, that there was a big dispute about whether this bill should be approved. The House Majority Leader, Al Carlson of Fargo, he is a Republican. He was argued vehemently against this bill, and when it did pass 49 to 42, it takes at least 48 votes in the North Dakota House to get something approved. Mr. Carlson was reluctant to pass the bill over to the Senate so the Senate could vote on it this evening. The Senate was to meet at 7 p.m. To take up a few bills, including this one. In fact, when I spoke to the Senate Republican Majority Leader, Rich Wardner of Dickinson, about this issue, and this is before I came over to the Peacock Alley, I said, well, Rich, you going to run this bill tonight? And he said, yes, that's the plan. I said, well, are they going to give it to you? And he said, well, I might just have to walk over there and get it. And so I'm kind of eager to get back to the Capitol after this and figure out just what's going on, because I understand that I have this image of Rich Wardner and Al Carlson with both with their hands on a piece of paper trying to take it away from each other. Representative Nathey, why should people, well, let's put it this way. How is this going to change public education in North Dakota?
Well, thanks for having me on, Dale. I just want to make one correction. I'm the chairman of the Education Committee.
Yes.
Yeah. Wes Belter might take exception to the other one.
Sorry.
We're all touchy about that.
I'm surprised I didn't call you a libertarian or something.
Wes is sick today. He wasn't around, so
yes.
You can't get it. So this will change education. It's a $714 million bill. This changes the way we fund K-12 education. As I said on the floor today, this state is going through some big, dramatic changes and challenges, and this funding formula meets those challenges. We have schools that are growing by leaps and bounds, and we need to help them. And as a result of this historic bill is a significant property tax savings to the people of North Dakota. And on the floor today, it went from a education debate into a tax committee debate about halfway through, and Representative Carlson said the same thing. It's The frustration on the other side of the issue is that this bill doesn't take care of some of the other property tax issues that we have. And quite honestly, I agree with all those issues. But this is first and foremost a K-12 funding formula bill first. And as a result of it is some property tax savings for the people in North Dakota. The other issues that have to deal with property tax savings, property tax reform, must be dealt in separate legislation. I've said that since day one. So, but that's, I think, where a lot of this is coming. But this will definitely this is a game changer in K-12 in North Dakota.
I think the reason I called you the chairman of the Finance and Tax Committee is that sometimes I did think it was a tax bill. He is Representative Mike Nathey is in his first session as chairman of the House Education Committee. Representative Sanford, how do you think that this will change public education in North Dakota?
Well, I think the first thing that happens is that we spent several decades where the prime funding source for education was the property tax. The state contribution was way below 50%, even though it's a constitutional mandate for the state to fund education, K-12 education. And so what happens with this bill is that essentially the state takes care of that responsibility by funding approximately 80% of the cost of K-12 education. And the other 20% would be in the property tax realm of local government. So what changes to me is that the property tax issue as it relates to school districts becomes very compressed, and there's controls in this bill that don't permit this 50 mills is the new baseline for local schools, and those controls don't permit this 50 mills to be escalated and or raised very much. And the other thing is, with that 80% that the state controls, the legislature will be able to determine exactly how much they want to put into K-12 each session, so they can compress the cost. If it's out of hand, they can compress it. If it needs more, they can take care of it. But the legislature will make that decision. And I think what's been the lament over time has been the legislature just appropriates a little foundation aid, and then the locals control all of the property tax and all of the issues related to it. So it seems to me there's more control for the state here, and that's probably where it ought to be.
Yeah, is that? I was going to ask you, is that a good thing in your opinion?
It is. I think I look at. I heard a speaker one time talk about the 4 M's of K-12, and he said that the state was responsible for the mission, determining the mission, and that happens now with the legislature. Secondly, the state was responsible for the money, and that's what this bill will do. Thirdly, the management component of education will be at the local level. We call it local control in North Dakota. And the fourth component is measurement, and the state ought to be able to insist on good performance and set up the measurement standards. So to me, this fits very nicely. We still leave the day-to-day management in the local arena, but the mission, the money, and the measurement, what do we expect for what we're investing in, is now in the hands of the state.
One of the elements of the debate about this bill in the House today was, does this encroach on local control? And I was thinking about yourself as a superintendent of schools. Would you find this legislation a bit chafing, restrictive?
I don't think I would. The years I was superintendent, the state had so little input into this that this would be really refreshing. But putting that behind me, I'll get over it someday. But anyway, I think what happens now is the state has always determined what the curriculum requirements are, what the expectations are in terms of the mission. This should be refreshing for local school districts to have the state picking up more of the tab. And I think the piece that still needs strengthening is this business of measuring how we're doing, what are going to be the milestones and so on.
And that's in the bill. There's a big study piece in there, Dale, that takes a look at the formula that we would be using and seeing how we can, when we come back next session, how we can make it even a little bit better. So the thinking has always been, let's get this bill passed, let's get it out there, let's take it for a test run for 2 years. We have an in-depth study to see if those numbers are right where they should be, higher or lower, and exactly what Mark said, there's some measurability, accountability factors in there. So,
yeah, Representative Nathan, I was going to ask you, what do you see as the next steps here?
Well, I guess just what I said. Well, if this bill were to pass, and hopefully, they don't take it up tomorrow, but if they do, we'll fight that battle. But if it passes, we'll see how it works in 2 years. We'll see what we don't like, what we do like. When we come back next session, we'll make the adjustments. And as Representative Sanford said, we will then now get to decide how much per student, what that figure is when we go into the 15 sessions. So, and we'll work off that study. That's an in-depth study. I like it because we can use the information that we've learned from the study, the information that we've learned from the formula, the good and bad, and mesh those two and come up with even a better formula, and even more refined formula.
The vote on the House vote on the bill was 49-42, and as both of you know, there was quite a lot of rumbling in the last several days about, well, we should kill this bill. Folks that didn't care for it. Why was there so much opposition to the bill? I mean, someone looks at this 49-42 vote and might think that this is a fairly controversial piece of legislation. Why did it generate so much opposition?
Well, it's my opinion, I've heard it for 4 months, and as Representative Safford knows, as being the chair and then kind of lead on this in the House, I've heard it for 4 months from my colleagues who don't like the bill, and I respect that. But they don't like it, quite honestly, because it's not taking care of the reform pieces, evaluations, caps on subdivisions, local subdivision spending, those sorts of things. And my argument has been, like I said earlier, this is a K-12 funding formula bill, first and foremost, with a result of some property tax savings. So it doesn't address all the other needs. I think they're frustrated from the 4 years that we've done with the prior tax relief package. And that's why I find so ironic is the people that want to kill this bill want to take the money and put it in that tax relief, the mill levy buy-down that we've done the last 4 years that nobody's really happy with. But yet they want to put it in that, and that has no spending caps. That has no restrictions such as 1319 has. So it's I've heard it all back and forth. Representative Stanford, you probably heard it too.
I guess I've heard it for several months as well. I just thought it was rather interesting to hear it on day 79.
Yes.
Let's send a message. What message are you?
79.
And quite honestly, like I said, I respect the fact that they don't like it, and that's part of the game. But my comeback has been, okay, what's your plan B? What's the alternative then? If you don't like this, I respect that. But let's come up with something different. But like you say, on day 79, it makes it a little tough.
What sort of changes have been made to this bill as it's moved through the process? I mean, this was an elaborate piece of legislation. It took a long time to write it. And obviously, the House Education Committee went through it with a fine-tooth comb. What improvements do you think you made to it?
Yeah, the debate on the bill was as big and complicated as the bill itself. But what we did mainly when the bill first came out, right now the schools could take up to 72 mills, and we were told that some of these districts were going to take 72 mills whether they needed that money or not. And so one of the things we did in the subcommittee is the House proposed a restriction that says that they cannot raise those mills. They can only raise their spending by 12% from their prior year's budget, equal into mills. And I know it's a little technical in the weeds for the audience, but that will slow down that growth of mills getting up to the 72 mill limit. And that was one of the other things we put on. Another one was we put on ending fund balances. Schools carry a pretty hefty savings account, ending fund balances, and making sure they work those down, because if we're going to spend this kind of money into K-12, they should not be carrying these enormous large balances. And I think that affected about 17, 18 different districts. But so those are just a couple of the things that we did. But the key from our standpoint, from the House's position, was to make sure we had restrictions on that spending.
And I think it's really important to add that the 12% that Mike references is on the 20% of the cost of education that the locals control. So it's not like it's a 12% gain to the school district. It's 12% on that 20%, which is really not that large. And the other 80%, whatever raises or adjustments would be made there, rests in the hands of the legislature. When you put those two together, it probably is going to mean something like 3%, 4% raises total for schools going forward. And that seems to me to be a good thing.
Representative Sandford, did you ever think you'd see this day where the state was picking up 80% of the cost of education?
To be honest, I didn't think I would last long enough to see that. But I do think it is a good thing. I think it is consistent with our constitutional responsibility. And I also think that it is part of the piece of eventually getting property tax reform. Not relief, but reform in place. Because to get reform, if the state is taking the lead on this particular function, it seems to me we should be able to get to deal with assessment practices and whether or not what the limitations might be for the locals in terms of mill levies as well.
This has been alluded to earlier, but what does this bill do to try to ensure the taxpayers that the public schools are doing well at what they're doing?
Well, I think it goes back to the accountability study that we put in there. That study will be measure the accountability for superintendents, teachers, those sorts of people. So quite frankly, to make sure the state is getting the bang for the buck for what we're putting in there. So $714 million is quite a sum of money, and we want to make sure we're getting our dollars worth. So,
and Dale, I would add there that the legislature has been very steady over the last 4 bienniums in funding a longitudinal data system for the state. So we now have data that will track the child's progress from the day they enter till the day they leave a school system. And so when you are, whatever kind of assessment pieces you're doing can be part of that. And you should be able to almost get real-time, when this gets refined, real-time data that tells you where an individual child is doing, and that information should be available to parents and obviously to teachers. They'll be using that, but so we're pretty close to having the basics of a really good assessment system in place because we have this investment in longitudinal data, and we can do it.
Yeah, and I also think in order to assure the way with the best atmosphere for the kids to learn, in the bill we have a construction loan piece in there of $200 million for school districts to take out. We passed a rapid enrollment bill earlier this session for $14 million to help schools with increasing enrollment at very high levels. So we're doing a lot, we've done a lot, and we want to make sure that these kids have the best opportunity in the best environment to learn.
How does this new approach affect different types of schools? I'm thinking, how does it affect rural schools, urban schools, schools that are growing, schools that may be or not?
Well, it certainly isn't. It is not consistent across the board in terms of how it treats them. One of the factors is property wealth behind a child. So in the new formula, what you are doing is you are taking 50 mils of local effort plus 3/4 of other local income that they generate, and then to that you add those up. Let's say that those two together equal $2,000. If the goal is $8,000, then the state will pick up the difference. That's $6,000. That would be a difference there. So what's going to happen is this local level is going to vary from district to district. If you're a poor district, you might only have $2,000. If you're a property wealthy district, that may equal $4,000. So the state is not going to be paying the same amount for every child like we historically have done in foundation aid. This takes the property wealth issue and puts it to bed. So equity lawsuits, so to speak, in the future should not be a result of this bill. This should provide that equity piece for you. The adequacy part of it is what the legislature will have. So how much is it going to take to do the kinds of things we want, and the legislature will set that target. And today it was $8,810.
And there's also a piece in there, Dale, that we adjusted the factors for small schools, and they had a 10% increase. So it's a complicated formula, but basically they got a 10% bump for schools under a certain amount of kids. And that was mainly done for small schools that we found out in the first half of the session. That was done on behalf of another representative, so who, by the way, voted against the bill. So I got to talk to him.
Going through the bill itself, it's interesting to see how it works. It essentially, and I want you two gentlemen to elaborate on this a bit. What the bill does is it says, okay, you have a student, and then there are a series of adjustments that are made to how much money you will get to educate that student based upon a number of things: what grade the student is in, what type of school he or she is going to, whether it's a small school or a large school, whether you're going to elementary school or high school, whether you speak English well or you do not. There are a number of factors, and that's what we mean when the term weighting factors was mentioned earlier, and that is what is meant by this, because you have a student and then you have all these adjustments at the end you come out with an amount of money that the state is going to give you to help educate that child. And can you tell us, Representative Sanford, can you tell us about the logic of some of these adjustments and why they're made?
Yeah, I think let's just use Bismarck as an example. Say that they have 12,000 students. the weighted student units probably will equal up to 14,000. So they would get paid on 14,000 rather than their actual number of bodies they have there. But the philosophy behind the weighting is that certain types of students invariably, not always, but frequently have extra costs associated with them. If you're in a small district, you don't have the advantages of size, economy of size. So the students, just by being in a smaller district, are going to have some additional costs associated with them, and therefore they get weighted, versus in the Bismarck School District, that student would still just be weighted at a 1. They would only be in a very small district, they might be counted as 1.3 students. So the idea is to try and take a look at the types of students you have, which relates to the kind of programs you then have to offer, and weight those things that add a little bit of cost to the bottom line. Special needs would be one of the factors that receives additional weighting. As an example, you referred to English language learners as being another. By the way, you could teach this class pretty good. So,
Mike, what do you, Representative Nathy, are you satisfied with the variety of weighting factors and how this formula works at this point?
Yeah, I am. Like I said, we took care of there was a small and isolated school factor that we had to take care of. When we kicked the bill out of the House to the Senate, there was some work that we left undone, and that had to do with the 11 reservation school districts. The Senate took care of that to a tune of about $10.7 million. So I think we got this bill in the best shape we can. I think the factors are fine. You know, some of the factors were cut in half because, quite frankly, we raised the per pupil payment. So there was a little bit of neutral revenue sort of things going on with the factors. So if we're going to pay more for the student, we're going to lower some of the factors. So,
is this bill going to allow schools or encourage them to offer additional programs or a greater variety of classes to students? Is that its purpose?
I don't see it in that way at all. I think that what will happen is you will probably still have the same spectrum of classes. I'm expecting that the study that it's going to go on over the next 2 years will define expectations and raise them a little bit. Our students do quite well, and I think the curriculum is strong enough in North Dakota. I see the differences coming in that this provides some flexibility in terms of what the delivery model might be. With the differences in the use of technology, social media, all these kinds of things today from 10 years ago it's dramatic. And those are going to be parts of the pieces that go into it. So I think rather than necessarily curriculum, it's probably going to be this delivery model and this program will support that.
Will this promote school consolidation?
That's a good question. That has been, it may in some schools, some of these smaller schools, the K-8 schools that are under a student population of 100, there was a move to increase that factor for schools under 100. We actually tried to do that, and the Senate did not go along with that. So that may be the unintended consequence, Dale. That's certainly not the purpose of the bill. But that may be one of those things. And quite frankly, seeing some of the schools and some of the things I've learned, some of them may need to think about doing that.
One of the things that you heard about the bill was that and in fact, the school finance specialist for the Department of Public Instruction said this in so many words. His name is Jerry Coleman. He said this favors schools that are growing, and it disfavors schools that are shrinking.
Yeah, if you have a school district that may be holding its own or growing, because it's a per pupil payment.
I mean, it seems like a fairly logical conclusion. But some rural schools say, "Oh, gee, it's going to be penalized." It'll be interesting to see how it turns out. We've been speaking to Representative Mike Nathy. He's a Republican from Bismarck and the new chairman of the House Education Committee. He's just finishing his first session as chairman of the committee. We also have been speaking to Representative Mark Sanford, a Republican from Grand Forks, who is a retired Grand Forks school superintendent, made quite a a great speech, I thought, on behalf of the bill on this House floor today. This is Dale Wetzel, and this is the Legislature Today. We'll be back in a moment.
Congratulations to KFYR TV.